This is episode 2 of our 5th season of the Simply Smarter Show. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We have more people filing in as we speak. But again, we have Mike and Marie today. It's going to be fantastic. And just as a quick reminder, we would love if everyone opened up their chat right now. And let's just get in the spirit of things. Make sure you're set to everyone. And I thought we could kick off today's chat with a pretty simple question. Where are you today? And because, our topic today is about health and wellness a little bit, what's something that you personally find to be both healthy and delicious? This is actually a harder question to answer than you might initially think, right? I mean, what is in that upper right-hand quadrant that is, maximally healthy and maximally delicious? And again, when chatting, make sure you have it set to everyone so everyone can see what you're saying and not just the 3 of us on screen. Mike, Marie, are we seeing generic stuff like, salad or smoothie or something? Are we seeing anything more specific?
Yeah, a lot of smoothies, hummus, soups, yogurt, some like fruits and vegetables, avocados.
So Marie, being our expert in health and wellness and nutrition, when you see some of these things scroll by, is any of it giving you like an allergic reaction? Are you going like, that's not healthy? Or is it all pretty on point so far?
I think it's all on point so far. It's a lot of produce, I would say, oranges, dates. Somebody said sweet potatoes. So I agree with all that.
Maybe delicious was not the right word. Maybe craveable is. Do you ever actually crave an orange? Orange is pretty good. I don't know if I remember thinking like, damn, I would really love an orange. I'm like just dreaming of an orange. I don't know if I've ever had that emotion.
If you have scurvy.
Yeah. Well, Mike, as you know, is our trend master, and he and his really, really talented team here at Datassential have put together a really fabulous number of reports as part of our Report Pro suite. And I just wanted to highlight a few of the things that you could jump in right now and download as we speak. I think most of those that are watching today probably have Report Pro already. If you don't have Report Pro, what's wrong with you? You should get it. But here are a few things you may want to check out. Our latest preview of 2023 trends. This is going to be pretty forward-looking. A lot of what's happening with AI and what that's going to mean for the world of food. Check that one out. We have something we just published, I think yesterday, which is our new edition of our economics, sort of macroeconomic tracker, which we call the table stakes tracker, that gives you the latest sort of government data, some of our proprietary data on what consumers are doing, what they're thinking about spending, and the economy and restaurant visitation. All of that's in there. It's worth checking out, and it gets updated every single month. And we have a great new deep dive keynote report on convenience stores. This is part of an ongoing series where we deep dive into every segment of both food service and retail food. So give that one a look as well. But just as a reminder, there is so much stuff in Report Pro now with brand new reports almost every single day. You will for sure find what you need if you want to explore a topic that's of interest in the moment. So check out Report Pro if you haven't already. And again, you could find even past webinars and whatnot in there as well.
And I would jump in really quick because it's on the screen right now. That 2023 planning calendar is brand new. Renee, who's often on these webinars, just published it yesterday. And if you're looking for kind of every single event, conference happening in the industry, it goes month by month on what's happening, all across the food industry and all of the events that Datassential is going to be at. So just a little plug for that one. It's a really good report.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So Mike, I'm going to kick it over to you and have
Yeah.
you tell us what the heck is going on and what is new. That salad looks pretty good. That looks pretty good.
Yeah, this is always our chance to look at, some of the news that's hit the industry, some of the new openings and products hitting retail shelves. I think a lot of people listening have probably seen this, but this is McDonald's. A lot of people are calling it their first fully automated store. It's semi-automated. They definitely have workers back there preparing the food, but it is a lot more automated and robot driven than any of the other build outs that they've built in the past. It's in Texas, so it's just out of Fort Worth, Texas. If anybody's nearby and has either been or plans to go in the near future. We'd love to hear a report about, what it's like. But it is just a really interesting concept. So it's really, really driven by, anybody who's buying food to enjoy at home or on the go. There's not really a dining room in there. Everything is built for speed. They use the technology where they start preparing the food when you start to get close to the restaurant, so they can kind of track when you're getting closer and start preparing your meal. There's one dedicated drive-through lane specifically for pre-orders, and then there's actually a little automated conveyor belt that brings your food out. And I think the interesting thing about this was just kind of the discourse around it when it opened. People, if they were excited about it, people who thought it was a good idea, people who thought it was a bad idea. I think the thing that always happens when you see this is everybody, freaks out that this is going to be every restaurant in the future and we're not going to see people anymore. But it's clear that this is just part of the mix. This is really built out for locations that, people are buying things for carry out and drive through. It's not like we're not going to have restaurants with seating areas in the future, but it is an interesting concept. And I think they did a good job on the build out.
What gets automated here that's not automated in a normal McDonald's?
I think the main things are that you can go through this entire McDonald's and not interact with anybody. So you can order at a kiosk, in the little ordering area right there. The drive-through, you don't actually interact with anybody. You either prepay or, pay through the drive-through, and an automated conveyor belt brings your food out. So it's really kind of all the workers are behind the scenes here.
But there's still physical people cooking the stuff up in the back.
Cooking
it's
the
not
food,
robots doing the cooking.
Exactly. I think there is some, robotic, back of house equipment, but there are still people here. Yeah.
So I wonder if this is sort of like a first step towards getting the public used to not having people, so that when they go fully robotic, it won't be as much of a shock.
Yeah, there's a few TikToks of people who went into the chef, and you can tell it's really shocking to them. You expect to see a human worker there greeting you. So I do think it's going to take some getting used to. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And then speaking of, technology, and in this case, social media and how it's impacting restaurants, we've talked multiple times on past webinars about TikTok hacks and consumers coming up with, their own menu items and putting them on TikTok. And so, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you have consumers who are engaged with your brand. You're getting, those viral, TikTok views. On the other hand, it's really difficult for back of house to, accomplish those. And so I don't know if people have seen this, but Waffle House, this is a number of Waffle Houses. This is one sign at an Atlanta Waffle House, but a number of Waffle Houses have put these signs up that specifically say, we don't want your TikTok hacks. Don't bring them in here. We're not going to prepare them for you. There was one that kind of went viral, making a burger out of Waffle House waffles. So it's the one on the left there. So it's this huge plate-sized hamburger that has bacon and cheese and the burger in the middle, but then it uses two massive Waffle House waffles. So it went viral on TikTok, and everybody was like, go to your local Waffle House and try this. And so now you see all these Waffle Houses putting signs up that they're like, no, don't actually order this. We're not going to make it for you.
Wait, isn't Waffle House known for customizing like their hash browns? You get them like loaded top,
put
baked,
whatever, yeah.
So how is this different than that?
One step too far. TikTok is just
So I don't know, but I'm guessing with high confidence that Waffle House is a franchised system, and this is a franchisee and not an official corporate sign.
Yes, yeah, I think that's probably true. Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, look, there's a couple of things. One, some chains have made great use of TikTok trends, and some have, launched items that became popular on TikTok and had the most successful LTOs ever. And then we have the issue of, I've been talking about this in our group for a while. How long until TikTok is no longer even available to us in the US? We'll see.
There's a lot of news about that. Yeah, this morning. Yeah.
Fancy food show.
Yeah, I didn't make it to the winter fancy food show. I'm hoping to make it to the summer one, but you always got to read about all the products that were released and unveiled at the fancy food show. I'd be interested, in the comments if anybody was at fancy food a couple weeks ago, if they saw anything really interesting. But this is one I saw come up multiple times, and actually a couple people sent it to me. But it's syrup, so it's syrup for your cereal, and it's basically, you can see they have a really wide range of flavors here, but it allows you to customize your cereal cereal with these flavors. So I think they had, at the booth itself, you could, choose kind of an unflavored cereal and then put the one that you want on top there. A lot of cereals are already pretty sugary. So the idea, this is probably, Marie, you're probably like, no, this is not the healthy option. But it is, I think it is, kind of an interesting concept when it comes to customization for the breakfast day part. It's sold, I think they sell it on Amazon right now. The last time we checked, all of the flavors had sold out actually.
Wow.
This is weird. What's the name of that place in Vegas? It's like that food museum that's sort of like kitschy and almost like a parody of food. It's like you're inside of the weird alternate reality grocery store.
The Meow Wolf one, the grocery store. Yeah.
This looks like something you would find there, doesn't it? Like even the packaging and the graphics, it almost looks like it's sort of a joke in some way.
Yeah, because that's that like old fashioned 50s like aesthetic. Yeah. No, it's real. It's absolutely real. Yeah.
And it looks super artificial.
Colors.
I hope nobody from Syrup is listening.
Any comments from a nutritional standpoint, Marie?
Oh, I think Mike is right. It's probably not my favorite product, but maybe. Did you say you tried it, Mike? Or
I didn't know. I'd like to try it. I mean, I don't really, not for any particular. I just don't really eat cereal in the morning. So
yeah.
I think all I have to do is just add turmeric to each, and you can call it healthy.
And now it's healthy. Yeah. I also feel, well, speaking of healthy, and what people are calling healthy, I feel like, if you work on the CPG side, you've probably been talking about this already, but late last year, the White House had their first conference in a really long, I want to say it was the first conference on hunger and nutrition in like a quarter of a century or something like that. And so now kind of all of the learnings and initiatives that, came out of that are kind of coming to the forefront. One of them is the definition of healthy and using that term in, packaging and foods and, what you're allowed to say. But the other is, FOP or front of pack schemes. So these are the actual schemes that they're testing. I think this was really hard to track down. So it's on the FDA website. You can see all of the different options that they're testing with consumers right here. If you can't track it down, send us an email at hello@Datassential and we'll send it to you, because I'd really be interested to hear what people specifically who work on the CPG side think of all of these different schemes. I think the main change that you definitely see here is that kind of red, yellow, green, color scheme there, where green is, yes, this is healthy, this is something you should be eating, all the way to red, something that you should eat either in moderation or not really consume.
I mean, I like the red, yellow, green aspect of it, but other than that, this is like totally not going to work. This is like 100% not going to work at all. I mean, look, if we did even a poll of this audience here and we said, hey, do you know roughly how many calories you should have in your day? Probably most people would give a pretty good reasonable answer. How many grams of fat? Most people probably would. If I said, how many milligrams of sodium, you'd get answers all over the board, even though we've seen that information 10,000 times in each of our lives on the back of a label. But like, this is way too, what they should do? They should get a reflective sticker they put on food packets and they can make it like convex or concave, like a funny house mirror. And you look at yourself in the reflection of that sticker and it shows you what you'll look like in 5 years if you keep eating that food. You'll either get skinnier or you get larger. That would work. So that's my proposal.
Maybe you should have been at the conference, Jack.
Yeah, like, hey, this is way too crazy. We'll see.
I mean, I would say too, like, I like the ones that continue to have the number or the percent of the item that's in the product, like on the top row there where it just says low, medium, and high. It kind of makes me think of how we've seen how consumers have such distrust in large organizations and the government. And it's like, okay, can we trust in their opinion that this is low or high?
And it also sort of allows, let's say, companies to game the numbers where they go to like the maximum level of low that you can get at, and they're all sitting right at that threshold, so they don't get the medium score or whatever it is. Right, because this is less information than we have today, isn't it?
Well, this is
right
just
for
front of
numeric
pack
values.
I mean, you'll still have the nutrition box.
Oh,
but this is only for front of pack. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Maybe that'll help. Red, yellow, okay.
It's a report that comes out every year. I think we talked about last year's report a year ago, but IKEA always does this annual report about life at home and how we're using our homes and interacting with that. And it's such a good report. It's, worldwide, and compares and contrasts consumers in different countries. And so much of the information in it, I just find super fascinating. So this is one slide it's a fairly long report actually. And the stat that you can see, 1 in 4 people have faked plans so that they can stay at home. They don't want to go out with other people, so they fake having plans just so they can stay at home. And that's even more the case for younger people. 1 in 3 young people want to stay home, which I found surprising. I thought it would have been the opposite. 1 in 10 people have talked to their plants in the last 12 months, but that's 1 in 4 consumers in India have talked to their plants. So I don't know what the
very shortly too. So that's a good segue into that.
Really, absolutely, yeah. So if you have a chance, it's a really good report. They offer it up for free on their website. I also think it dovetails a little bit. We did last year that the American Consumer, How America Eats report that Jared had actually talked through on one of the webinars. And we specifically get at some of this similar data, but around food and if people are eating food in bed and if they're using cloth napkins. And I think the two reports together really kind of showcase an interesting view of the consumer today.
Yeah, this is one of the big trends that we've seen is the increased importance of home in people's lives. I mean, you're there a lot more because of work from home and whatnot. But people are just sort of more attached to their house than ever. There's a lot of, look, even the explosion of Netflix probably has a lot to do with that, right? You can be more entertained in your home than you can anywhere else right now. And we see it with restaurant operating hours too. And we did that analysis that restaurants are closing a lot earlier than they used to, and people are spending more time at home. We got to get out a little bit more though.
Yeah, some of it's a little scary, yeah. And then finally, really, really quickly, I think there were 2 articles in the last couple of weeks that people might have noticed. They kind of took up a lot of room in the food industry when it came to discussion. One was the Bloomberg article, the front cover article on plant-based meats. And the other was this one in Grub Street about what they call shoppy shops. And it's any of those, small curated grocery stores or supermarkets that you find in urban areas. And they all tend to have kind of a very similar product mix. So you see that Grazia olive oil, you see the Tin Wife, tinned fishes, you see kind of these same brands over and over. So it's just one of those articles that I think puts some terminology to this, phenomenon that people maybe had noticed but not really discussed. And so this was actually Big Night, which is one of these little shops in Brooklyn, actually saw the article and they created their own little bag that says Shoppy Shop on it. So all week I've been saying Shoppy Shop about, we have a bunch of them here in Chicago. But I feel like if you live in an urban area, you know exactly what this phenomenon is all about.
Oh, yeah.
So Mike, I don't know if you caught this story recently as well. This one is really quite interesting too, and here's the headline that goes with it. New evidence emerges that the hamburger actually originated far earlier than we thought that it did, and they found this Civil War era photo of what looks like a soldier eating something that looks a heck of a lot like a hamburger, and they think that this completely turns on its head when and where we thought hamburgers actually originated. It's like pretty crazy, right? I mean, there's some things that we think we've known for a long time, and maybe they just ended up not being true. Did you see this one?
No, I didn't. That is pretty crazy.
It's crazy because it's total BS, right? This is a completely untrue thing. We made this picture with AI. We made this story using AI. It sort of spat the story out for us. You just sort of say, hey, make a fake headline and story about how hamburgers were actually found in a Civil War photo, and this is what you get. And here's the interesting thing. So I think many of you have probably played with ChatGPT at this point already, which is what we use to create, this block of text. So no big deal. But 2 days ago, they just released a tool, and it's called their I forget what it's called. Their text classifier tool, and it's meant to combat the potential problem of people creating stuff, text via AI, and people not knowing it's AI generated. So they say, hey, with this tool, you could take text, put it in here, and the tool will help you guess whether or not it was AI created or if it's actually authentic text that somebody wrote themselves. So ChatGPT from OpenAI created this block of text. We then took the exact same block of text and put it into its text classifier tool so that it could tell us, oh, this is BS. This is like some AI created story. It's not real. We hit submit, and it says this considers the text to be unlikely AI generated. So we were all very, very screwed. I think we're gonna have a very, very tough time in society to know what pictures are real, what stories are real, what came from a computer, what came from a human. The damn company that made the first block of text can't even tell us that they made the first block of text. So this is the future we are facing, but it is a future that is completely filled with opportunity. So many of you will know that we do these sort of like fun Datassential characters that are sort of like food puns. So this is Abraham Lincoln. This is the AI created version of Abraham Lincoln. Mike, Marie, this one's a little bit tougher. This one's like a little bit weird. Any guess who this is?
Benicio del Toro.
You're there. You're right there. It's a little hard to tell, right?
Yeah. What?
It's a taco. It's Benicio del Taco.
But
we found AI to be quite helpful for creating these types of things. And Mike, you found a service now that is using generative AI to create food images.
So Lunchbox, the ordering platform, they actually, I mean, we've, reported on this previously that, having a really great photo of a dish is, great way to get your purchase intent scores to go up, but it's hard, you got to hire a photographer. It takes a long time. So Lunchbox, the ordering platform, is actually, they've built this kind of AI engine where you can just put in what your dish is, what the background looks like, kind of the aesthetic of your brand, and it'll spit out an image for you to use in their ordering platform. This is actually, it was reported on by QSR magazine, and they tested it with a kind of variety of menu items. So this is one here which is clearly a pretty outlandish menu item, but they do look realistic. Like, some of these AI images kind of have that, like the Benicio del Taco image, that kind of like really wild, like the textures are a little off-putting, whereas these really do kind of look like items that you could purchase and eat.
Yeah, and we've been actually using generative AI ourselves to create food photography that we could then test as an LTO or whatnot. So here's a couple of different interpretations of a carne asada sandwich that we created with AI ourselves. Here you have it with a cheese sauce. There's a little bit of kale inside that sandwich as well. Here's a different interpretation of that exact same sandwich, but with different toppings. Now you have a little bit of like this, greenish pesto-y type of sauce. You got some grilled onions and stuff in there. It's convincing enough to use in actual product testing. So if you're thinking of testing something, you don't quite have photos for it, there might be a pretty good solution to just create something that's good enough for a test at a minimum and get consumer reactions too. What's really interesting though is not just sort of creating imagery for something that you can sort of understand, like a carne asada sandwich, but something really fanciful that exists maybe only in your own mind, like, what would pizza soup look like, for instance? All these can be made in just seconds right now. And for all those crazy ideas you ever had, it's now possible to get a really quick reaction to those ideas by testing them with consumers using images that were created in just a few moments. So what I'd like to do going forward for the remainder of this presentation is, for the remainder of the slides, when we have an image on the slide, we're going to play a game. You all are going to guess in chat, is that an AI image or not an AI image? AI image means we created it via AI, not AI image means it's a real photo or something came off a stock photo site or something. So you can probably all guess at this right now. Is this AI or not AI? I hope that we do a good job with this one. What are we seeing in chat? AI or not AI?
Mostly AI.
Okay, so yes, this is an AI image that, again, we're able to make in just a few seconds. So for all the future slides, when we get to one that has an image, you're going to guess in chat, just type in AI or not AI, and let's see how good of a job we do. So we're going to talk about health and wellness, and I wanted to start with just probably the most important part of health, which is, are we living longer or not? And you can see what U.S. life expectancy has looked like for the past, 100 years roughly. So we're, north of 40 years average life expectancy in the US at the turn of the 20th century. And over the course of the next 100 years or so, we saw a dramatic increase in life expectancy, where basically for every decade that went by, we added 3 more years to human life on average, which is crazy. I mean, that's amazing. And you can see things started to flatten a little bit. And you can see some events, World War I. We actually had, the period following Spanish flu. We actually saw an increase in life expectancy during the Depression. And a lot of people say that's the silver lining of the period that followed the Depression. But recently, we've seen this line really sort of flatten out. I don't know if you can see my mouse wiggling back and forth so much. And I wanted to sort of zoom in on that a little bit more. So let's take a look, for instance, at what's happened since 1960 with life expectancy in the US, and more specifically, what's happened in the last few years. And you can see that even pre-COVID, we sort of stopped going up, right? I mean, we've essentially flattened, and you could even sort of draw a line back to maybe 2013 or so, and we haven't really seen any meaningful gains in how long people live in this country. And to really put it in perspective, this chart shows you for each decade of the last 100 years or so, how many years of life expectancy were gained in that decade. And we had a lot of decades where we're getting like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years of life expectancy. But in the 2010s, it was basically flat. It didn't go up at all. And we actually saw a decline in life expectancy in the most recent years. And the question is, why? What's causing this? Is it in our lifestyle? Is it our diet? It continues to be a major issue. And I think that's one of the reasons we want to focus today's conversation on health and how to make sort of healthy, delicious, and what consumers are trying to do, what their objectives are, and what the industry can maybe target to give everybody a better outcome that's also quite tasty in the process. Now, it's hard to talk about life expectancy and overall health and food without talking about obesity too. I think we all know that we have certainly an obesity epidemic that's true not just of the US, but of most other first world countries. But you can see there's a pretty big difference between countries. And I won't even comment further. Marie, you are our expert on this. What do you see in this chart?
Well, it's discouraging to see our country leading the charts in this way. I guess I'm not surprised, and we know that in recent years and decades, our obesity and overweight rates continue to increase. So Japan down there at the very bottom, they're in a blue zone. They have very healthy population. I think there's a lot we could learn from them, but yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
It's interesting, right? I mean, if you go back to the 70s, Japan actually had a higher rate of obesity than China did. But, with its modernization, China has overtaken Japan, even though Japan, is largely modernized itself as well. So there's pretty big gaps over there. But we're at a point now where, we're in the approaching 40% obese in the US. And if you add the overweight population, you're at like 70 almost. That's a big chunk. And, all the different types of early diseases and whatnot. It's a big thing for us to consider. So we asked folks what types of conditions have you had? So this is self-reported within the past 5 years. We got this really great photo of a gorilla that they were actually treating in hospital. And the things that people said they most had, 1/3 of us have anxiety and depression. It's a big number. That's like 100 million people just in this country. And the overweight number is interesting. 30% say they've experienced being overweight in the last 5 years. That is a very low number compared to what reality is, because the reality is more like 60 to 70%. So I think that's part of the issue as well, that a lot of folks have convinced themselves like, oh, no, that's not me. But statistically, the numbers just don't add up, right? Hypertension, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. There's a number of different things that people have, and we'll see as we get into the data about what things people are trying to add to their diet to combat these conditions. But Marie, is this sort of jive with what you know of people's well-being?
I think so, and I think it's really encouraging to think about what a big role food and beverage has to play in helping address these issues. The ones that rise to the top of the chart. There's a lot of promise and potential for food and beverage to help improve those conditions. So we have a lot of responsibility and opportunity as an industry to help with these.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a doctor. He's a neuroscientist yesterday. We had a long conversation about food and mental health in that case. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in your brain that, things as simple as various vitamins, vitamins B, D, zinc, magnesium, he thinks can help with. And he could not stress enough the importance of omega-3s in a pretty high dosage as well. Like you'd have to take 17 pills like a day to get the amount of omega-3s he's talking about. So he does it in like liquid form instead, but that's supposed to help with anxiety, depression, and a lot of the other conditions that people have these days. Which takes us to the next point, which is a lot of people take medication. Drugs are extraordinarily common. Oh, AI or not AI, by the way, this one should be pretty obvious. 48% take medication in this country right now. Poor panda. And here are the things that they take medication for. A quarter, more than a quarter, take it to manage their physical well-being. Maybe they got blood pressure issues, their cholesterol. 16%, that's a lot of people take ongoing medication for their mental well-being, anxiety, depression, SSRIs, whatever it might be, physical disease, and then to manage pain. But we're a pretty filled up nation. And Marie, I don't know if you've studied much of this in your nutritional past, but what does it say to you?
Well, it makes me think of the notion of food as medicine. And I guess in recent years, I think that conversation is getting louder and people are thinking about food as medicine and different specific foods, beverages, nutrients that can help treat certain conditions. So again, see a lot of potential there for using food in a medical way.
And is it Tulane that has that special food as medicine program?
They do, and they're not. I don't think they're the only one anymore. That there's more that have popped up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they do a thing where everyone going through the medical school there has to go through like a food as medicine curriculum, right? Which is fantastic.
Yeah. So normally I think it's doctors get one nutrition class, but there it's a much more robust program.
Yeah. So we hear all the time and we see it in our surveys and stuff. Everyone's saying, hey, I want to get into shape and, feel better about myself. I'm willing to make these things, whether it's a resolution or something else. And we want to sort of dig a little bit deeper into that and ask maybe just ask a question to all of you. It's interesting, like, who do you get information from now on what's on health info, right? Like it used to be maybe like magazines around like TV or something, but more often now it's like YouTubers and social media. Which YouTube or social media personalities do you find to be really good for health information? Actually, I would love to just know what everyone else uses. There's a few that come to mind for me, but there's like so many potential out there. So if you want to share with the community, I don't know, are we seeing any names pop up right now? Anyone volunteering people they follow for health advice or tips?
So someone mentioned Max Lugavere, who we had at Foodscape too.
Yeah.
Someone mentioned Dr. Mark Hyman, Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic again, Dan Buettner, Eric Roberts. Some of these I'm not familiar with, but a big variety of names.
Yeah, I think you're seeing some of these people get bigger and bigger YouTube channels now, as well as more people are thinking, I don't know if it's like just strict biohacking stuff, but more people are almost trying to learn like the instructions of making themselves healthy in some way. So, okay. All right, so we're going to be talking about healthy, and let's go at it. And I want to start with maybe just a poll, and this is going to be an interesting one. So, when is it most important to eat healthy? Breakfast, lunch, dinner, late night snack. When is it most important to eat healthy? Mike, Marie, do you have a personal opinion Do you have a guess as to what people are going to say?
I mean, I feel like you always hear breakfast is the most important meal of the day and, start your day off right. So I feel like at least, I don't know if that'll be on top, but it'll be a good number.
Marie, what do you think?
Oh, I did see the results, so I do know, so I feel like my,
Okay, so we're not going to say. So you know the actual consumer is. So I'm going to hit pause on the poll. I think most of you voted already. So this is what you all said. You said breakfast number 1, but dinner not that far behind as a number 2. So breakfast, a little bit of a gap, then dinner, and then pretty much everything else. Let's see what consumers say in our survey of consumers on this exact same question. Here it's consumers think it's breakfast and nothing else even close. 2/3 of consumers say the most important time to eat healthy is breakfast. And then dinner's way, 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 way further behind. So this is sort of interesting. And it's also sort of interesting if you look at this on a generational basis. So if we look at the different generations, you can see there's some sub patterns over here, right? Gen Zers are way more likely to say breakfast. By the time you get to boomers, they still typically say breakfast, but much less so than Gen Zers. Boomers and Gen Xers, if you can see my mouse, are a little bit more likely to say, yeah, dinner's going to be a pretty important time to do this. Now, I think it's interesting, but I also think a lot of it is sort of moot. I mean, because regardless of the generation, everyone says breakfast number 1. But if you ask those same people, well, what's the biggest meal you have each day? Nobody says it's breakfast, right? Like breakfast is like the smallest meal people are eating each day. So they're saying the most important time to eat healthy is when I have my smallest meal, which doesn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense, right? I have this one meal that like 2/3 of people say it's the biggest thing I eat all day, and very few people say that's when it's most important to be healthy. So I think, like, I don't know, Marie, isn't like the old adage like, hey, you maybe want to have like a really big breakfast and a smaller lunch and a smaller dinner, and that figures into your sleep patterns and how you metabolize food throughout the day, and that would be more optimal. It feels like half the message got through that breakfast is really important, but the message about like the size of each one of those meals has not really gotten through.
yeah.
Is that a fair way of looking at this?
I guess I think that this is also kind of personal and subjective, and some people just aren't hungry in the morning. And in that case, if that's true, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice to force ourselves to eat if our body's not wanting that. So I think it's really personal, and it's not necessarily that breakfast should be the largest meal for everyone. I think for some people that makes sense, but not every single person.
I mean, how many of you had experiences where it's like 9 a.m., like you're sort of hungry and like, ooh, should I have breakfast or should I wait a couple of hours and the lunch options become available to me? And you're like, the lunches might be better. So then you just wait and you do the lunch thing instead, right? So we've taught ourselves that breakfast must consist of only certain types of foods or only certain types of things being available. But sometimes people want other stuff too, and maybe that's why they put some of that off. I don't know, but we gorge on dinner. Dinners are really, really quite large in this country. And if you ask consumers, hey, between eating food at restaurants and eating food at home, which do restaurants or homes win in each one of these various areas, right? So we have affordability, convenience, craveability, enjoyability. So yes, homes are thought to be more affordable. And then, craveability and enjoyability, restaurants have a bit of an edge there. But for healthiness, home beats restaurant in consumers' minds by a really, really wide margin. So for those of you or of us that are sort of more on the restaurant side of things, there's an automatic disadvantage for people that are looking to eat healthy because they're going to typically associate that with food from home. Now, what if you said not just food from home overall, but specifically we want to put restaurant food up against packaged foods that you buy at the grocery store? So it's essentially like processed packaged foods. And here's what it looks like. When you ask people what's healthier, you actually see this interesting sort of like, cross X pattern where the different generations tend to think a little bit differently. So Gen Zers, for some reason, are more likely to think that packaged grocery products are healthier than restaurant food, whereas boomers are more likely to say that restaurant foods are healthier than packaged grocery products. Now, I don't know why this is, but my suspicion is that maybe as you get older and you have more health conditions you're looking out for, and you're taught that you have more things you need to watch out for in terms of certain like nutritionals, sodium and whatnot, because packaged grocery products have a nutrition label and you can look at it and see what's actually good or bad for you. Maybe that's made folks, that are, Gen Xers like me or boomers come to the conclusion that, oh yeah, that stuff is not going to be as good. Whereas restaurant food, you don't really know, right? You just sort of like, it's sort of like a mystery to you. So you assume that that might be the better option. I don't know. I mean, Marie, do you have any thoughts as to what could be triggering this phenomenon otherwise?
I think of the really close association with healthy and fresh. And I think the fact that packaged products don't really have that association of fresh might be driving the sentiment here.
But what would be different by the generation, though? Why would Gen Zers be different than boomers in that regard?
That one puzzles me. I guess I'm not sure. Mike, do you have thoughts on that?
I think it's maybe like what I was thinking, like, hey, if you realize that you got to watch your sodium level and you see how much sodium there is in, every food package, maybe that makes you say, oh yeah, the restaurant stuff's going to be, healthier, until you actually look at, that and realize how much sodium that has, but no one looks at that. So
that's true. Yeah, that nutrition information is so much easier to find with packaged food. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Some of it may be too that the younger generations are a little bit more used to the new generation of packaged products that have the ingredients on the front and their clean label, and maybe their perceptions of the category overall are just changing.
Yeah. So we also asked consumers, what are some barriers to eating healthy at home? Oh, AI or not AI, by the way. And the number one thing is just it costs more. I think that's not a big surprise. You hear that, pretty regularly, and you think even anecdotally, I think all of us could have just sort of figured that out. That would be the number one objection. And you can see there's a few others, but it's really about cost. Now, the thing that's really, really interesting is if you shift away from the home and go out of home, what keeps you from eating healthy out of home? It's not cost that's number one anymore. It's this feeling that when I'm away from home, it should be indulgent in some way. And then it's that there's just not enough healthy options available. And then you see cost in the number 3 spot. Pretty much anytime you have a list of answer choices, whenever price doesn't come up as the number one response, you have an interesting phenomenon, because price almost always comes up as the number one thing across many, many different topics. But you have this mentality that like, hey, I'm out of the house, I'm going to get like the crazy indulgent thing. An earlier stat that we reported on is something like over 50 to 60% of the time when someone goes out to eat with the intention of eating healthy, they change their plan, their stated plan, and knowingly, consciously order something that's unhealthy. Maybe they thought they were going to get the salad, but all of a sudden they see like this beautiful cheeseburger go by, and they say, "Oh, I got to get me one of those things instead." So that is a question for us. But how do we find that intersection of, let's say, craveability, indulgence, sort of that first question we asked at the top of the hour? I don't think an orange is going to be the answer necessarily to what's going to get people to go to restaurants and try to order the really healthy thing, when they're often looking for that piece of indulgence too. But I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive anymore, right? Health and indulgence are not oppositional concepts by definition. They can coexist. And look, this is one of those things where there is a real need to have healthier options away from home. I mean, Marie, I don't know what you see in these numbers.
I think I agree and echo what you said. Definitely a need for us and for our industry to work toward making more healthy options available and helping market healthy options more effectively to consumers from restaurants, because health just isn't yet an area where we're winning in food service. We're not what consumers think of first for healthy options.
Yeah, not even close. So, we have data too from the recent research on just what consumers trust. 62% trust small food companies to provide healthy options. 49% left trust large food companies to do so. And even fewer, just 45%, trust restaurants to provide healthy food options. So maybe we can do something to offer some more options and bridge that gap in trust. And it's also sort of interesting. This is fascinating. So 40%, so 2 out of 5 consumers say they are consistently meeting their goals for eating healthy, which means 60% are not, right? But let's look at that 40% that say they're meeting their goals for eating healthy. It's a little bit higher, self-reported, among men than among women. Maybe their goals are not as lofty among men. Who knows? This is, are you meeting the goals you've set for yourself? You can see it's higher in urban areas, less so in suburban areas, and even less so than that in rural areas. 49% of those saying they're just trying to maintain their weight say they're meeting their goals and eating healthy, versus just a third of those who say they're trying to lose weight say they're meeting their goals and eating healthy. There's an income gap too. Nearly 50% of those that are higher income say they're able to meet their goals for eating healthy, but that number drops significantly among lower income groups. And Mike, you said you worked on political campaigns, so I'll throw this question to you. Well, what explains the 7% gap between Democrats and Republicans in this regard? Actually, you probably shouldn't answer that
let's
question. If anyone's brave
yeah.
enough to volunteer a thought in chat, be my guest, but I ain't gonna force it. Oh, and by the way, do people think this picture is AI or not AI?
This is a good one to ask, actually. Yeah. And
AI or not AI?
we did lose Marie. Her computer had to update itself.
The spirit of Marie is with us, and her physical presence or her corporeal form should hopefully return shortly. So we have this beautiful bowl of AI or not AI soup in front of us. And we can look at some of the data that we have on what people think is healthy. So 59% of people think soup is healthy. Only 3% think it's unhealthy. And if you take the difference, 59 minus 3, you get a gap of 56%. And that's what we call a plus 56% net healthiness score. So I just want to show you how the calculation works. If you do something like chocolate, for instance, 22 think it's healthy, 34 think it's not. So you have a minus 12 net healthiness score for chocolate, AI or not AI. And we can see what this looks like across different types of foods and ingredients as well, right? So, vegetables have a massive net healthiness score. Fruits have a massive net healthiness score. Beans are right there too. Nuts are there. Poultry, yogurt, eggs, all very, very positive in consumers' perceptions of what's healthy or what's not. On the other end of the spectrum, fried foods, violently in the opposite direction, and chocolate, slightly negative, as we saw as well. But we can look at this not just for, sort of classes of food or ingredients, but we could look at, maybe types of dishes and whatnot as well, different foods and drinks. And I wanted to call out a couple of things over here. So one, yeah, people think oatmeal is like super healthy. Is it? I don't know. If Maria was with us, maybe she'd be able to tell us a bit more about oatmeal. But you can see the differences in some of these scores for things that are otherwise, fairly like items. So one, over here, we can see my mouse moving. You can look at the difference between a turkey burger and a plant-based burger, where turkey burgers are thought to be much healthier, well, moderately healthier than plant-based burgers even. Or more interesting is look at the gap between sweet potato fries that are a plus 21 and regular French fries, which are a negative 50. A 71-point swing because the underlying potato has changed. But otherwise, it's essentially the same food. So there are big differences in consumer perceptions. And look, this list goes on and on and on. We're showing just a few. And maybe I can do a little quiz for all of you. AI or not AI, is this a real animal? But look at the different cuisines that we have on this page right now: American, Caribbean, Cajun, Southern, etc. Which of these do you think consumers rate as the healthiest cuisine overall? Just put in chat. Which of these do you think it is? I'm not going to try to bias the answer by saying anything. Are we seeing any patterns, Mike, Marie, in what people are guessing?
Mediterranean, Japanese, Greek, Mediterranean. Mediterranean by far number one.
By far. And that is right. Greek Mediterranean is number one, not by far. It's right there along with Japanese. And then you have many of the sort of American style things, Cajun, American, Southern, at the other end of the spectrum. I think this is an important thing. I mean, there are very, very sharp perceptions that consumers have around what's healthy and what's not. Maybe some of this is informed by reality, and maybe some of this is just perception they've built up over time. But if you want to get people eating healthy, I think this is an important stat to consider as we construct those healthy items, so that they either be positioned as healthy, or we can inject healthiness into a category that's otherwise not normally thought of in that way. So what motivates healthy behavior? What do you think motivates healthy behavior? Is it people want to eat healthy so they can look good, so they can feel good, so they can prevent disease and health conditions, or so they can live a long life? I will preface this by saying that I think this is like one of those questions that you ask and you'll not probably get an honest answer to, just because, you know, we're sometimes ashamed, or I don't know, we just don't want to admit it, or we think of ourselves, you know, in a different way than we actually look. So I'm gonna hit pause because we're going a little bit long, but most of you have guessed already. So I'm gonna end poll real quick. So people think this audience thinks that it's to look good is number one. And then you have sort of like feel good and prevent disease, sort of a split, and live a long life is the last one. I sort of feel like living a long life is pretty good. If I could live to be 1,000,000, I would totally do that. But let's see what consumers actually said. So I think consumers are lying. I think it's way more than 8% that say they're doing this to look good. So you got to take that one with a grain of salt. But feeling good is number one. Otherwise, preventing disease and health conditions and living a long life, number three. But you can see that there are differences generationally as well, right? As you get into the older generations, Gen Xers and boomers, disease and health conditions become more of a concern, as you would expect. And then for looking good, boomers don't really care that much, is what we see. Okay, so some of the top health motivators that we see, this is quite interesting. Number one is heart health, by far. Nothing else, across all the work we've done over many, many years, it has consistently always been heart health. But you can see it's just one of many different things that consumers have concerns about. And I will say this right now, we're going to go way over on time if we try to do all of this. So we'll probably reserve some of this data for our very next webinar. And I'm going to speak sort of at a more normal pace so we don't pass over anything that might be important. But let's take a look at how this sort of breaks out. If you ask people, here's an interesting map. Each one of these dots is sort of like a health objective or something people might want to sort of have in their diet in some way. And going from left to right, is it less desirable or more desirable? And going from bottom to top, is it easy for you to meet this goal, or is it hard for you to meet this goal? And don't worry about the circle over here. We just put a little circle around this so it's easier to label everything visually on screen. We don't have overlapping text, but you can sort of see like what are some of the things that people find to be really desirable. Yeah, vitamins, minerals, but you know what? People say that's relatively easy for them to meet that goal, right? It's really important to them, but they can sort of figure that stuff out. The other stuff I would look at are maybe some of these things that we highlighted in blue over here, which are things that are pretty desirable to people, but they generally say is quite difficult for them to achieve. Questions around pesticides, hormones or antibiotics. And even though I think the humane raising of animals isn't necessarily about nutrition, consumers do sweep it under this broader umbrella of health and wellness in some way. And that's a challenging thing for them too. Marie, any thoughts? I don't know if your mic is back on this screen.
I think it is. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I think it's interesting what's hard to meet and more desirable speaks to sustainability in some, finding humanely raised animals, finding pesticide-free crops. It's sort of more of a responsibility on food companies and food producers to make those options more available. Yep. So that could be a call to action for the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can move us along, we looked at some things that consumers want to keep out of their diet, and I was slightly surprised, not super surprised, I guess, that sugar is the number one thing on the list, and you can see some of the other ones: unhealthy fats, high fructose corn syrup. But sugar is a clear number one. And I think you've seen this reflected in a lot of the, retail products that have come out in the past few years where, the no sugar aspect has been emphasized quite a bit. But just know that this is a very substantial concern among consumers. And if you look at this generationally, this is really quite interesting. Then maybe we should sort of do a little pause after this because we are running short on time. This is what people say they're trying to avoid and how it breaks out by generation. Each one of these lines is a different generation. So yellow is boomers, green is Gen Z, and you can see Gen X and millennials in there too. And what I would sort of look at is sort of the size of the gap between the generations. And you have like some attributes like sodium, for instance, there's a huge gap between boomers and Gen Z. Preservatives, there's a big old gap between boomers and Gen Z. And then you have some other attributes where the gaps are much smaller, right? For sugar, yes, boomers still care more than Gen Z and millennials about sugar, but it's not a massive gap. For things like fat, yes, boomers care more, but it's not a massive gap. For calories, boomers still care more, but it's not a massive gap. And then you even have some of these attributes at the end, which are sort of like newer things that we've been taught to care about, I think, just more recently over the past couple of decades. Gluten and dairy in particular, where boomers actually care less than some of the other generations about this. If you look at Gen Zers, they care a lot about dairy, more so than any other generation. If you look at gluten, boomers care less, but you have elevated levels for the other generations, millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Xers. So everyone has sort of a different type of objective, and generations are usually fairly predictive in what matters. Now, it's not like evolution, a whole lot of evolution has taken place in the last 25 years that would cause a generation to rationally care more about something versus another. A lot of this is societal, right? It's like the things that we've seen, grown up with, and whatnot. I mean, I don't know, Marie, do you see anything interesting in this that you want to talk about?
Oh, I think definitely sodium makes sense. As we get older, we think more about that. And to your point, gluten has been in the mainstream conversation for 10, 15 years, a bit of a newer thing. So these all, I think, are no huge surprises in this data.
Yeah, and then just as there are things that people want to exclude, there are things they want to include as well. One of them is vegetables, of course, and you can see the rest. Similar type of chart. It changes from one generation to the next. And I think we probably should take a pause over here. I am super sorry that we didn't get nearly as far along as we thought we would. And we will come back next time and cover some additional aspects of health. There's a little bit more about general health that we'll cover. And we'll also do a review of what's happening with intermittent fasting and with plant-based, and specifically plant-based meats. We've seen reduced demand in that category, and we want to talk about some of the underlying reasons why, and how to sort of bring that back up, because I think the underlying interest is certainly still there, but we want to address, I think, head on some of the reports you may have seen in the news about, like, oh yeah, people aren't buying it as much at the store or whatnot. We'll talk about that. Now, next time, you're going to get to sort of see one of 6 different flavors of Mike, who has promised to come dressed as one of these 6 variations, depending on the one that you like best. So in chat right now, can you just vote which Mike do you like the most? And this is a Mike we will try to manifest for you in just about a month. Is it Street Fighter Mike, 1950s sitcom Mike, 1980s, hair rock band Mike, James Bond Mike, cute, furry, funny, adorable animal Mike, or Game of Thrones Mike? Which Mike would you like to see? Mike, when I asked you if I could show the slide earlier today, I didn't tell you that you'd have to come dressed as that.
Yeah, you did. And that's a different question. You asked me which one do people think they like the most? Yeah, I feel like asking them what do they want me to dress as
on Amazon and ship it to you. So we can definitely fulfill this as long as you're willing to.
Yeah.
Sadly, I'm traveling next month, so I won't be on the webinar. It just came up.
It just came up.
Yeah.
Do we have a winning vote?
I feel
I
like
actually think we have
it's all
to.
on the lines.
Yeah.
Do you think we actually have to tabulate? Is it all over the board?
They are kind of all over. I don't know. I guess, yeah, 5 does seem to be.
There's only one answer. The answer is 5. Clearly. The other ones aren't even. If you said anything other than 5, you're clearly not paying attention. There's only one possible answer to this question. And just so you know, I think you've probably all figured this out. Every image we featured in this presentation today, past Mike's section, have all been AI generated images, and we actually had a whole lot more we didn't quite get to. We'll show you some of them next time as we get into all that underlying data as well. This generative AI thing is big, and many of you are probably already using it in your work already, but we're on the cusp of something quite tremendous, I think, as big as the original internet was. So it's gonna be some very interesting times ahead. With that, thank you all.